Hello everyone, my name is Apurva and welcome back to my series 100 Days 100 Problems. This is day 13 where I take your Power Apps challenges and turn them into working solutions. Let's take a look at our today's problem. Here someone wants to implement an 8-seat desk reservation system. They are trying to achieve 8 seats A to H layout. Users can click and book a seat with time slots between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. Only one booking per person per day, visual indicator if seat is available or booked, option to cancel booking, and preferably works online. So we are thinking Power Apps and SharePoint here. Okay, let's begin. For this, we require our data tables first. For this, I'm going to create two lists. First, we will have a list for seats, which will store information of our seats from A to H. Now we'll create our second list called seat bookings. This will store all the information of bookings that have been made. So we need columns like booking date, start time, end time, the status of the booking. So we can have a booked status or any cancellations that might have occurred. And then finally, we also need a lookup column to look which particular seat this person is booking. Now I'm going to create some entries. Now ideally you can also have a booked by column here to see who has booked this particular seat. But since SharePoint already has a default column called as created by, I'm going to use this same column and patch this column from Power Apps. Now that we have our list ready, our first task is to have 8 seats in Power Apps. So I'm going to first connect our SharePoint list in Power Apps. Now we need a horizontal gallery to place our 8 seats. So let's add a gallery. Now I'm going to change the wrap count from 2 to 1 so we can see all 8 seats in one glance. Now if you have images for your seats, you can map those here on the image control. I don't have them, and just for this POC, I'm gonna delete this image and we're gonna use a text label instead. We have all 8 seats visible now. Now I just need to know whether this particular seat is booked or available. So we'll use lookup function for this. Here notice how I'm using seat dot value is equal to this item dot title, which is basically comparing the name and not the IDs. Reason being, I'm directly hitting the data table, which is seat bookings, and if I use ID it will give me a delegation warning. So if you were to use IDs instead of name, you need to first put this seat bookings in a collection and then call that collection here. So on app start, you can create this collection using clear collect, and then once this is created, you can then use this in your gallery. Now if you notice, even if we use IDs to compare, it won't give us the delegation warning. Now, just for this demo purposes, I'm going to directly hit seat bookings, because then I have to reset the collection several times in different places. So just to keep it simple, we are directly going to use seat bookings instead of using the collection. Here we do know that seat A is booked, but it doesn't show me for which date it is booked. So we do need to add that filter in, that this booking date is equals to today's date, or even better, the date that I have picked up from the date picker. So let's add a date picker. Let's test this formula. So for today's date, it should show booked, but for other days, it should not show any message. Let's arrange these labels properly, and I'm also going to add a rectangle so we know exactly which seat I'm talking about or working on. So we know that C8 is booked, but we also need a visual indicator to show that the other seats are also available. So let's add that if condition. Let's test this formula. For that, I'm going to make another entry in the backend, but this time the status will show as cancelled. So any cancelled seat is also technically available for us to book. So let's see if I add a cancelled entry here, whether it shows up on the Power Apps. Notice that seat B is cancelled, but it shows as booked here, which is wrong. We need to be able to account that cancelled seat as available so others can book it. So let's fix this formula. Let's go back to the post to see what's next. We have already done 8 seats A to H layout. Now next is to add a button so that users can click and book a seat. Add a button from the insert panel. For adding any entry, take a look at our backend list, what all things we need. Booking date, which we already have, but we are missing start date and end date. So we need a drop down or something that we can map our times from. Since Power Apps does not have a time picker, we'll have to create our own collection with all the timings. Now, since the time slot said 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. in the post, I'm going to start from 8 a.m. and end it at 6 p.m. You can declare this collection on start of the app. Now add two drop downs and we are going to call our collection in those drop downs. So now we have got booking date, start time, end time. Created by is the person who is creating it. The status will be booked when you're booking, and the seat is the one that you will be selecting. So now we just need to add our formula on select button and we are ready. Also notice how seat A also has the button book visible, but that shouldn't be the case because that seat is booked, so that button should be hidden. So the same formula that I have used for showing that the seat is booked, we are going to copy that and put it in the visible property of that button. So now the first button or the button for seat A is invisible, it's hidden, and so the user cannot book that seat. Now let's begin with our onSelect formula for the button, which will help us patch that entry in the backend. When you want to create a new entry in the backend, you're going to use patch function, your data source name, then you will use defaults, basically default whatever is in that table, and then you will patch all the columns that you need to send the entry in. So we need booking date that will come from the date picker. Then start time will come from the drop down. Now here our start time and end time is basically coming from a drop down, which is nothing but a text. But we need to convert it into datetime value. That's why I'm using datetime value function. Then created by is basically going to be auto generated by SharePoint. Then we have status. Since it's a choice field, we are going to add value, and then in front of value, we are going to write the actual value that we need to patch. And then finally the seat that we are trying to book. Now your seat is a lookup column, and that's why SharePoint needs it in a certain format. We need to add the ID and also the value for this seat to be accepted. Now let's test this formula. Before that, notice that my timing is 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. and I'm trying to book seat C. But in the backend, notice default saves the time in the UTC time zone. So I figured this out later that the timings were a bit off, and I will show you how to fix this later in the video. Now going back to the problem, we need to also have a feature where only one booking per person per day is allowed. So let's work on that now. First, let's delete the extra two bookings I have in the backend, one with the cancelled status and one with the booked status. So now I have only one seat which is booked under my name. As per this, since I already have seat A booked with me, I need to make all these book buttons disabled so that I'm not able to book any other seat. For this, I'm again going to copy the same formula that we currently have and put it in the display property, display mode property of the button. Also, we are going to remove this seat condition because we don't care which seat I have booked. Only thing that we care about is that I have booked a seat for the selected date. And also, if you have another columns, let's say booked by, like I have created by, we can also use it to compare it with the user that has logged in. So that now you can see all the buttons are disabled. But if I go to the some other date where I don't have a booking, you can see all the buttons are now enabled. With this functionality done, I think the only thing remaining now to do is to have an option to cancel the booking. Here you have two options, either to use the same button that we are using for book and write a if else condition to make booking or canceling depending upon the choice. But to just keep things simple, I'm going to add another button here for the cancel option. Again, this cancel button needs to be visible only on the seat which is already booked. So we are going to use the same visible property we had on the book button and paste it here and do the opposite, so that now this button is only visible when this seat is booked. Now here we are going to update the existing record. So you're going to write patch, again select the data source, and here write the condition to find that record for which you're trying to patch, so that Power Apps knows which particular record you are trying to manipulate. And then finally, you are going to only update that column or specify that column which you are trying to update. Now let's go ahead and test this functionality. Currently you can see I have one seat which is booked. We are going to cancel this seat, and as soon as I cancel, all the buttons are unable for booking, and you can see in the backend that seat is cancelled. At this point in the video, we have covered all the things that we needed to do. 8 seats, we have A to H. Users can click and book a seat between the time slots 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And only one booking is allowed per day per person. And we do have a visual indicator to see if that seat is available or booked. And finally, an option to cancel the booking. Now remember I told you about how SharePoint by default saves it in a different time zone. To fix this issue, click on the gear icon, click on site information, then click on view all site settings. Then under the site administration, click on regional settings, and this is where you can update the time zone to your time zone, and then the timings won't be off. And finally, I have cleaned my app a bit, so let's take a look at the final version. This is the final look. I have got two screens which are fully functional. History and help are just there as placeholders. In book seat, we can select date from the date picker. Then we have select time. You can select your start time, end time. And notice how if you select anything in the start time, let's say 10 a.m., you will only see anything that is after 10. So your end time cannot be greater than the start time. Then on the right side, you have all the seats. If you click, it shows you which seat you have selected. You can either book it or you can deselect it. If you deselect any seat, you can see how the book itself, like the button, is disabled. Now, right now, if you can see in the back end, all the seats are booked between 2 a.m. to 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. So if we go to 2 p.m. and select 4 p.m. as end time, you will see all the seats. But even if you select 5 p.m., they will still be disabled because the seats will overlap. but there is no booking between 4 to 5 p.m. So if we try to select 4 to 5 p.m., it all the seats will be available. Also notice, if you try to select the same seat that is booked, it will give you an error saying that seat is already booked, and also the book button will be disabled. So now let's try and book a seat. As soon as I click book, you can see the chair is now red, and at the top it indicates that I already have a booking, and the book button is also disabled, so I cannot make another booking. Now let's go to our second page, which shows me the booking, my seat number and everything. If I click here, this will cancel the booking that I have. And that's it. If you like this video, please like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you next time with another problem.